Commander Jake Morrison stood by the large window of the research ship called Horizon's Edge and looked at the colorful space clouds outside. He felt both amazed and frustrated at the same time. The Alien Council, called the Galactic Council, had spent 6 whole months studying humans and testing them. Now they were finally ready to announce their decision about where humanity fit in the galaxy. A blue light appeared in front of Jake and formed into a floating image. It showed an alien named Ambassador Velthris who came from something called the Calderon Empire. This alien had 4 eyes, and they all blinked in a way that seemed like he was laughing at a joke. Jake had learned to recognize this expression during his time dealing with aliens. Velthris spoke in a voice that sounded both formal and slightly mocking. He said that humans were now classified as a species with minimal threat level. The exact category was 7, subsection Delta. This meant humans could join the galactic community, but with many restrictions on what they could do. Jake felt his jaw tighten with anger. Category 7 was almost the lowest rank possible. It was reserved for species that the galaxy considered almost harmless. It was an insult hidden behind fancy official language. The aliens were basically saying that humans were weak and not dangerous at all. Dr. Helen Carter worked as the chief scientist studying aliens on the expedition. She walked over and put her hand on Jake's shoulder in a comforting way. She spoke quietly and said that at least humans were now allowed into the galactic community. That was something positive, even if the rank was insulting. What the Galactic Council did not know was a big secret. Humanity had carefully planned to hide their real strength. When the aliens asked to see human weapons, Earth's military leaders had shown them only the weakest and oldest technology. They displayed basic guns and simple missiles. The spaceships they brought were civilian models that had been modified for exploring space, not for fighting wars. Nothing military or advanced was revealed. The leaders back on Earth had made a smart decision. They believed that looking weak would give them time. Time to learn about all the different alien species and their politics. Time to understand who was friendly and who was dangerous. Time to figure out the rules and laws of this huge galactic civilization before showing their true power. The first alien group to make a move against humans was called the Zenth Confederation. Only a few weeks after humanity got their low ranking, Zenth war fleet started moving toward human territory. Humans had established 3 colony worlds in a region called the Outer Rim. These planets were named Navara, Crestfall, and New Seattle. Almost 2 million human colonists lived on these 3 worlds, building new lives far from Earth. Captain Ryan Brooks was in charge of the defense station that orbited around Novara. When the Zenth Armada arrived with 300 warships, their commander did not even try to talk or negotiate. The message that came through was short and cold. The Zenth commander said that humans had 48 hours to evacuate everyone. After that time, this sector of space would belong to the Zenth Confederation. The message explained that under Galactic Law Statute 4.7, this action was completely legal because of humanity's low classification. Ryan looked at his tactical officer, whose name was Lieutenant Amy Zhang. He said with frustration that the Zenth were not even trying to negotiate or discuss the situation. Amy pulled up the legal documents on her computer screen and explained why. She said that according to how the Zenth interpreted the law, Category 7 species did not have any territorial rights beyond their home system unless a more powerful civilization sponsored them. Since no one sponsored humanity, the Zenth felt they could legally take the colony worlds. The human colonists immediately began emergency evacuations. Ships started loading people as fast as possible, but moving 2 million people in just 2 days was impossible. Many would be left behind when the deadline ended. Ryan sent an urgent message back to Earth asking for help. He knew that even if help came, it would probably arrive too late to save everyone. On Earth, the Global Defense Council held an emergency meeting. President Douglas Hayes listened to all the reports with growing anger. Fleet Admiral Claire Bennett was a tall woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She laid out the military options available. Claire explained that the 7th Fleet was close enough to reach the colony worlds in time. The fleet had 22 ships. She added that the Zenth had no idea what human ships were really capable of doing. Secretary of Defense Martin Cole argued against sending the fleet. He was worried about revealing humanity's real strength. He said they had spent 6 months carefully gathering information about the galaxy, while everyone thought humans were harmless. If they showed their true military power now, they would lose that strategic advantage. President Hayes stood up from his chair. His face showed that he had made his decision. He said that their people were in danger and some might die. He ordered Claire to send the 7th Fleet immediately. It was time for the galaxy to learn what happens when someone mistakes patience for weakness. It was time to show what humans could really do when they were threatened. The message was sent out to the 7th Fleet. Ship captains received their orders to move to Novara as fast as possible. Crews ran to their battle stations. Weapons systems were powered up and checked. The engines of 22 warships hummed to life. Vice Admiral Greg Palmer commanded the fleet from a large carrier ship called the Valiant. He read the orders carefully and then looked at his command crew. Everyone was tense but ready. They had trained for this moment even though they hoped it would never come. Greg told his navigator to set course for Novara at maximum speed. The ships would arrive in less than a day. He then addressed his entire fleet over the communication system. He told them that human colonists were depending on them. Families with children were waiting to be saved. The Zenth thought humans were weak and harmless. It was time to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The 22 ships of the 7th Fleet jumped into faster than light travel. They left Earth's solar system behind and raced toward the colony world of Novara. In less than 24 hours, the galaxy would learn that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Zenth Confederation had made a terrible mistake. They thought taking human worlds would be easy. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Back on the defense station, Captain Ryan Brooks waited and hoped. He kept evacuating colonists, but knew time was running out. The Zenth fleet loomed in orbit like predators waiting to strike. Ryan looked at the countdown timer. 36 hours left. He whispered a quiet prayer that help would arrive in time. The 7th Fleet appeared at the edge of the Novara system in a brilliant flash of blue and white light. Vice Admiral Greg Palmer stood on the bridge of the carrier Valiant and watched as the Zenth Armada's formations began to shift in visible confusion. The alien ships had not expected human reinforcements to arrive so quickly. Communications Officer Nina Ross looked up from her station with a slight smile on her face. She reported that the Zenth were sending a message and they seemed very surprised that humans had so many warships. Greg smiled thinly and told her to open a communication channel so he could talk to the Zenth commander. The screen flickered and showed a reptilian alien whose face looked angry and arrogant. This was War Master Krevix of the Zenth Confederation. His scales were dark green and his eyes were yellow with vertical slits like a snake. He spoke in a harsh voice that the translation system converted to English. Krevix said that the human presence was illegal according to galactic law. He demanded that the human fleet withdraw immediately or be destroyed. His tone made it clear. He did not take the humans seriously despite seeing their ships. Greg introduced himself. Calmly as Vice Admiral Palmer of the Earth Defense Fleet, he explained that the Zenth had invaded sovereign human territory and threatened human citizens. He said the Zenth had one opportunity to withdraw their forces peacefully. Krevix made a hissing sound that was his species' version of laughter. He said that humans were classified as Category 7, which meant their military could not possibly stand against a Tier 3 power like the Zenth. He gave one last warning for the humans to leave immediately. Greg nodded to his weapons officer, whose name was Commander Pete Sullivan. He gave a simple order to target the Zenth flagship and fire one kinetic penetrator. Pete pressed the firing button without hesitation. The Valiant's railgun fired a rod made of tungsten metal. The projectile moved at a speed that was a significant fraction of light speed. It crossed the distance between the fleets in just seconds. The tungsten rod hit the Zenth flagship's energy shields and punched straight through them, as if they were made of paper. The rod continued through the hull and struck the ship's reactor core. The massive warship exploded in a blinding flash that lit up the entire star system like a newborn sun. The Zenth fleet's organized formation immediately collapsed into chaos and confusion. The aliens had never encountered weapons that could simply ignore their energy shields. All of their military training and tactics were based on shield technology. They had no defense against solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Greg gave the order for all ships to engage at will. He told his fleet to show the Zenth what Category 7 really meant. The human warships moved forward in perfect coordination. The battle that followed was brutal and one-sided. Earth ships had been designed using lessons learned from hundreds of years of human warfare. Humans had been fighting each other with increasingly deadly weapons for centuries. They understood war in ways that many alien species did not. The human fleet used tactics the galaxy had never seen before. Thousands of small autonomous drones swarmed out from the carriers and attacked in coordinated patterns. Human ships launched cyber warfare attacks that infected and crippled Zenth computer systems. Stealth technology made some human vessels nearly invisible to alien sensors. The weapons ranged from antimatter missiles to directed energy beams that could slice through hull plating like a hot knife through butter. Within 3 hours, the battle was over. 42 Zenth ships managed to escape by jumping into faster-than-light travel. The rest of the armada was either destroyed or captured. Burning wreckage floated throughout the Novara system. The Zenth had lost over 250 warships. The human fleet had suffered 0 losses. Back on Earth at the Global Defense Council headquarters, military and political leaders watched the battle footage in complete silence. When the last Zenth ship either exploded or fled, no one spoke for a long moment. Intelligence Director Karen Foster was the first person to break the silence. Karen said that the entire Galactic Council would have access to this battle data within hours. She stated that humanity's secret about their real military strength was now completely exposed. President Hayes nodded slowly and said that was good. He wanted the galaxy to see the footage. He wanted every alien civilization to watch and understand what happens when they threaten human lives. News of the battle spread through the galactic community faster than light travel. The Zenth Confederation's total defeat at the hands of a Category 7 species was unprecedented in modern galactic history. Nothing like this had happened in thousands of years. Emergency sessions were called in government chambers and councils on 1,000 different worlds. On the council homeworld called Axis Prime, Ambassador Velthris reviewed the combat data for the 3rd time. He could not believe what he was seeing. His young assistant named Rixus hovered nearby, looking equally shocked. Rixus asked how this was possible. He said the technology assessment of humanity had been thorough. The council had tested human weapons, shields, and propulsion systems. Everything had checked out as relatively primitive. Velthris spoke quietly and said that humans had shown the council exactly what they wanted the council to see. The real question was why humans had hidden their true capabilities. What was their purpose in appearing weak when they were actually strong? The answer came in the form of a transmission broadcast from Earth. President Hayes appeared on screens across the entire galaxy. His image was sent to every member species of the Galactic Council. Billions of aliens watched and listened. Hayes began by addressing the people of the galaxy. He explained that humanity had existed as a species for 300,000 years. Humans had fought wars that consumed their entire planet. They had split atoms and turned atomic energy into weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had built artificial intelligence and mapped the human genome. They had created technologies that would seem like magic to their ancient ancestors. He paused to let the words sink in across the galaxy. Then he continued explaining that humans had entered galactic society with humility. They had chosen to learn and observe rather than boast about their capabilities. They had accepted the Council's classification even though they knew it was wrong. The reason was simple. They wanted to understand the galactic community first before revealing everything about themselves. But now the Zenth had threatened human colonists and invaded human worlds. The aliens had forced humanity's hand. They had made it necessary for humans to reveal their true military power. The image on the transmission changed to show footage from the Battle of Novara. Alien viewers across the galaxy watched human ships destroy a fleet that outnumbered them 10-1. They saw weapons and tactics they had never imagined. They saw a species that fought with terrifying efficiency and coordination. Hayes spoke again and said this was what humanity could do when forced to fight. But he emphasized that humans did not want war. They wanted peace, trade, and cooperation with other species. However, humanity would absolutely not allow their people to be threatened or killed. They would not permit their worlds to be stolen. Hayes made formal demands. He insisted on an immediate reclassification of humanity's threat level. He demanded full territorial rights to all human colony worlds. He said that if these demands were not met, humanity would consider it an act of continued hostility. The transmission ended abruptly. Across the galaxy, representatives from 1 billion different species held their collective breath. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The balance of galactic power had just shifted in a way no one had predicted. A species that had been dismissed as harmless had proven to be incredibly dangerous. Now the question was how the galaxy would respond to this revelation. The Galactic Council chamber on Axis Prime erupted into complete chaos. Representatives from hundreds of different species shouted accusations and demands and threats all at the same time. Ambassador Velthris struggled to maintain order as the session dissolved into pandemonium. Everyone was talking and no one was listening. Councillor Tharn of the Krovic Unity roared above the noise. He was a massive creature covered in thick fur with tusks protruding from his jaw. He shouted that the humans had lied about their capabilities, and this was grounds for immediate expulsion from the Council and severe sanctions against Earth. Councillor Lyra of the Seraphim Collective countered his argument. She was a graceful being that looked almost like a floating jellyfish made of light. She spoke in a melodic voice and said that humans had simply defended their territory against aggression. She pointed out that the Zenth had violated established buffer zones and threatened human colonists first. High Chancellor Mordain raised one translucent hand, and the entire chamber fell silent. Mordain was a towering crystalline being from the ancient Luminar civilization. The Luminar rarely spoke during council sessions, but when they did, every species in the galaxy listened with respect and attention. Mordain's voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes on a breezy day. The Chancellor said that the question before the Council was not whether humanity had deceived them. The real question was why the Council had been so easily deceived. The second question was what the Council intended to do about a species that had proven far more dangerous than their assessment had indicated. Admiral Claire Bennett arrived at Axis Prime 3 days after the battle. She commanded a diplomatic envoy aboard the cruiser Endeavour. She brought Dr. Helen Carter with her, and also a new face named Ambassador Marcus Webb. Marcus was a former Marine who had transitioned to diplomatic service after 20 years of military experience. He was tall and broad-shouldered with gray hair and steady eyes that had seen combat. The reception the humans received was extremely cold. Their ship was escorted by 6 Calderon destroyers as if they were prisoners rather than diplomats. When they docked at the Council station, armed guards met them at the airlock. The guards did not point weapons at them, but their presence was clearly meant as intimidation. Marcus muttered quietly to Claire that this was quite a welcome. Claire replied that the aliens were scared, and that was actually good. Fear breeds respect. Helen observed the guards and the hostile stares from passing aliens. She said that the Council members were definitely afraid, and that meant humans had their attention. The 3 humans were brought before an emergency tribunal. This tribunal consisted of representatives from the 20 most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Ambassador Velthris presided over the proceedings. His 4 eyes studied the humans with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Velthris began formally by addressing the humans by name and title. He said that they stood accused of falsifying their species threat assessment. They were accused of violating first contact protocols and concealing military capabilities that posed a potential danger to galactic stability. These were serious charges. Marcus stepped forward confidently. He said with respect that humans had violated no protocols whatsoever. They had answered every question truthfully during the assessment. They had demonstrated their technology exactly as requested. If the Council's assessment was inaccurate, that reflected the limitations of the Council's evaluation methods rather than any deception on humanity's part. Councillor Tharn snarled angrily. He said that humans had shown the Council primitive weapons during testing. Then they had destroyed a Tier 3 military fleet with technology the galaxy had never seen before. How was that not deception? Claire interjected calmly. She explained that humans had shown conventional weapons because that was what the Council asked to see. No one from the Council ever asked if humans had other capabilities. No one asked about humanity's full military doctrine or strategic planning. The Council had made assumptions based on incomplete data, and that was not humanity's fault. High Chancellor Mordain leaned forward with interest. The crystalline being asked why humans had hidden their true strength in the first place. Helen took this question and answered thoughtfully. She said that humans were not fools. They had entered a galaxy filled with species that had been traveling through space for thousands or even millions of years. Humans were the newcomers and the weakest in terms of experience. She asked a rhetorical question about whether anyone would walk into a room full of strangers and immediately tell them about every weapon they carried. Humans had wanted to observe and learn and understand the political landscape before revealing everything about themselves. That was simply logical caution. Mordain acknowledged that this was a reasonable strategy. However, the Chancellor explained that this strategy had created a serious crisis. The Zenth Confederation was demanding reparations for their lost fleet. 36 species were calling for humanity's expulsion from the Council. At least 6 civilizations were now viewing Earth as a potential threat that needed to be neutralized before humans became even more powerful. Marcus spoke flatly and said that if those civilizations tried to neutralize humanity, they would learn the same lesson the Zenth had learned. Humanity had not sought this conflict, but they absolutely would not back down from it either. While the tribunal deliberated behind closed doors, the situation across the galaxy grew more complex and dangerous. Several aggressive species saw opportunity in the chaos and confusion. The Vrax Dominion was an aggressive empire that had been interested in human colony worlds for months. They decided this was the perfect time to test Earth's resolve. 3 Vrax battle groups entered human space without permission. They were targeting the outlying mining colonies in the Kepler Belt, where humans extracted valuable minerals from asteroids. Unlike the Zenth, the Vrax were more cautious and calculated. They sent a formal challenge rather than just attacking. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the patrol destroyer Relentless when the Vrax transmission arrived. She was a 20-year Navy veteran who had experience fighting in the corporate conflicts of the Belt, before Earth unified its military forces under one command. She had short red hair and a scar across her left cheek from a battle years ago. Her executive officer, Lieutenant Ben Hayes, reported the contents of the Vrax message. They were demanding that humans give up all mining rights to the Kepler asteroids. The Vrax were giving humanity 72 hours to respond to their demands. Lisa asked how many ships the Vrax had brought. Ben checked his sensors and reported 47 warships. All of them were heavy cruisers or larger. He added that the Vrax fleet outgunned the human defenders by a ratio of 10 to 1. Lisa smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. She said this was good because humans had been wanting to test the new missile pods they had recently developed. She ordered Ben to inform Earth Command that they were engaging the enemy. The Kepler Defense Force consisted of just 5 human ships, but they had something the Vrax knew nothing about. Earth had developed a quantum-entangled communication system that allowed instant communication across any distance. They had also created networked artificial intelligence that could coordinate combat operations across multiple ships simultaneously. When the Vrax fleet moved forward to attack, they expected to face 5 separate ships fighting independently. Instead, they found themselves facing 5 nodes in a single distributed weapon system. It was like fighting one giant ship that happened to be in 5 different places at the same time. Missiles launched from positions thousands of kilometers apart. Their AI guidance systems shared targeting data instantaneously through quantum communication. Point defense systems worked in perfect synchronization to protect all 5 ships at once. When one ship detected an incoming threat, all 5 ships immediately knew about it and responded as one organism. The most devastating weapon was the cyber warfare suite that had already proven effective against the Zenth. This suite went to work on Vrax computer systems with ruthless efficiency. The human AI had been specifically designed to crack alien computer systems, and it was very good at its job. The Vrax War Master watched in growing horror as his fleet's systems began shutting down one by one. Ships lost navigation control and started drifting. Weapon systems went offline without explanation. Life support systems began failing. Those ships that managed to fire their weapons found their shots intercepted by defensive systems that seemed to predict every move before it happened. The War Master demanded answers from his tactical officer. He wanted to know how the humans were doing this. He shouted that his fleet had quantum encryption that was supposed to be unbreakable. His tactical officer had no answer to give. What the Vrax did not know was that Earth had spent decades developing offensive cyber warfare capabilities. Human hackers and AI researchers had created tools specifically designed to break into computer systems and take control. The galaxy had never imagined such weapons existed. Within 6 hours of the first engagement, the entire Vrax fleet surrendered. Not a single human ship had been lost or even seriously damaged. The Vrax warships were towed to human military stations where their crews were taken as prisoners of war. Back on Axis Prime, High Chancellor Mordain called the tribunal back into session. All the delegates had watched both battles, against the Zenth and the Vrax. The mood in the Chamber had shifted dramatically from anger to something closer to fear and grudging, respect. Mordain spoke slowly and deliberately. The Chancellor said that it appeared the Council had severely miscalculated. They had misjudged not only human military capability, but also the nature of human civilization itself. Humans fought with a level of coordination and ruthlessness that suggested a warrior culture, yet they had entered the galactic community peacefully seeking friendship. This contradiction troubled Mordain deeply. Marcus stood and asked permission to address the full council. Mordain gestured for him to speak. Marcus walked to the center of the chamber where everyone could see him clearly. Marcus began by saying that the council saw a contradiction because they did not truly understand human history. He confirmed that yes, humans were warriors. Humanity had been fighting wars against each other for their entire existence as a species. But that was exactly why humans valued peace so much. Humans knew the cost of war in a way that species who achieved unity more easily could never understand. He continued explaining that every weapon humans built was created with the memory that humans had once turned those weapons against each other. Earth had nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities. Earth had biological weapons that could kill millions. Earth had chemical weapons that caused horrible suffering. All of these weapons were originally created to kill other humans during Earth's many wars. Marcus said that this terrible experience had taught humanity important lessons about restraint and caution, and the value of diplomacy. Humans had not deceived the Council to prepare for conquest or domination. They had hidden their strength to buy time for understanding. Now that the galaxy had forced them to reveal their military power, humans were still not seeking war. They were seeking respect. He looked around at all the alien representatives. He said that if the Council would recognize human sovereignty and respect their territorial claims, humanity would become the strongest ally any civilization could ask for. But if species continued to threaten humans, they would discover that humanity was the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. No one seemed to know what to say. Finally, Ambassador Velthris spoke in a thoughtful tone. Velthris said that the Council would vote on humanity's reclassification. But he wanted Marcus to understand something important. If the Council granted humans what they were asking for, humanity would also inherit new responsibilities. Tier 2 species were expected to contribute to galactic security. They were expected to mediate disputes between smaller civilizations. They were expected to use their power responsibly and help maintain order. Claire spoke up firmly and said that humanity was ready for that responsibility. They understood what was being asked and they would fulfill their obligations. The vote was scheduled to take 3 days. During that time, more incidents erupted across the galaxy. Human merchants found themselves harassed and threatened at neutral trading ports. Earth's embassy on a trade world called Nexus Station was attacked by xenophobic extremists who threw explosives at the building. 3 human diplomats were injured, though none were killed. Most seriously, a human exploration ship named the Discovery went missing in unclaimed space near the borders of the Ashrak theocracy. The Discovery had been on a routine survey mission mapping unexplored star systems. The ship was under the command of Captain Victor Kane, who was a seasoned explorer. Victor had mapped more star systems than most pilots would visit in their entire careers. When the Discovery failed to check in at the scheduled time, Earth Command immediately suspected something bad had happened. Admiral Claire Bennett was still on Axis Prime when she received the news. She immediately contacted Fleet Command back on Earth through secure channels. Claire gave orders for a battle group to be sent to the Ashrak border immediately. However, she told them to hold position and avoid engaging unless they were fired upon first. She said that humanity could not afford another incident while the Council was voting on their status. Fleet Admiral Kyle Nash responded from Earth. He acknowledged the orders but said that Claire should know something important. The Ashrak had been making threatening statements about human expansion into space. Their religious doctrine divided all spacefaring species into 2 categories, the chosen and the heretics. Kyle said he would give Claire one guess about which category the Ashrak had placed humanity in. The situation exploded into crisis when the Ashrak government issued an official statement. They claimed that the Discovery had violated their sacred space and had been cleansed as divine punishment. To prove their claim, they provided images of wreckage. The broadcast showed the destroyed hull of the Discovery floating in pieces. The reaction on Earth was immediate and furious. President Hayes convened an emergency cabinet meeting within the hour. The public was calling for immediate military action. Protests erupted outside HFY facilities on neutral worlds. Angry humans demanded justice for the murdered crew. Intelligence Director Karen Foster reported grimly that they had confirmation all 73 crew members aboard the Discovery had been killed. The HFY had not even attempted to capture them or take prisoners. They had simply destroyed the ship without warning and killed everyone aboard. Secretary of State Linda Grant spoke with barely controlled anger. She said this was not an act of war, but an act of mass murder. Humanity had to respond with force. President Hayes looked to Fleet Admiral Kyle Nash and asked what military options were available. Kyle explained that the Third Fleet could reach the HFY border in 18 hours. However, he warned that the HFY were not like the Zenth or Vrax. The HFY were a Tier 2 civilization with real military power. They controlled over 1,000 warships and ruled 47 star systems. If humanity went to war with them, it would not be a quick victory. This would be a real and prolonged conflict. Secretary of Defense Martin Cole demanded to know what the Galactic Council was doing about this massacre. Karen answered with disgust in her voice. She said the Council was doing nothing. The HFY were claiming religious exemption under galactic law. Because their religious doctrine viewed heretic species as spiritually equivalent to dangerous animals, they were arguing they had the legal right to defend their territory with lethal force. President Hayes's expression turned cold and hard. He told his staff to get him a direct communication line to the HFY leadership immediately. He wanted to speak to whoever was in charge. 20 minutes later, Supreme Hierarch Drath appeared on the video screen. Drath was the absolute ruler of the HFY theocracy. He looked vaguely insectoid with chitinous plating covering his body and multifaceted eyes that glittered with religious fervor and supreme confidence. His mandibles clicked together as he spoke. Drath addressed President Hayes with obvious condescension dripping from every word. He said that humanity was learning a painful lesson about galactic realities. The chosen civilizations had rights that heretics did not possess. The human ship had entered sacred space without permission. It had been cleansed according to divine law. This matter was now closed and there would be no further discussion. Hayes spoke in a deadly calm voice. He said that the HFY had murdered 73 unarmed researchers and scientists. That matter was far from closed. He was giving the HFY one chance to turn over those responsible for the attack and pay reparations to the families of the dead. Drath's laughter sounded like clicking mandibles and scraping chitin. He asked what humanity would do if the HFY refused. Would humans actually attack them? He reminded Hayes that the HFY were Tier 2. They had fought wars against entire empires and won. He asked mockingly what one primitive species could possibly do against the might of the HFY theocracy. Hayes replied with two simple words. He said that the HFY were about to find out. He told Drath that the HFY had 24 hours to comply with his demands. After that deadline passed, humanity would consider the entire HFY civilization to be a hostile entity. Humanity would respond accordingly with the full force of Earth's military. The transmission ended abruptly. Drath sat back in his throne and immediately contacted his military commanders. He ordered them to prepare for war. He said the humans were far more arrogant than the HFY had anticipated. It was time to teach these primitives a lesson in humility and the power of the chosen peoples. The 24-hour deadline passed without any response from the HFY government. Supreme Hierarch Drath had made his decision to ignore humanity's demands. President Hayes gave the order that would change everything. He authorized Operation Righteous Fury. The Third Fleet was commanded by Admiral Scott Pierce, who was a veteran of 30 years in Earth's Navy. His fleet consisted of 32 warships, including Earth's newest and most powerful vessel. This ship was called the Prometheus, and it was a dreadnought-class warship. The Prometheus was 5 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to level an entire continent. Nothing like it had ever been built by humanity before. When the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of HFY space, they were immediately detected. The HFY had mobilized their entire home fleet to meet the threat. Over 300 enemy warships waited in defensive formations. The HFY were confident that their numerical superiority would guarantee victory. Admiral Pierce opened a communication channel to the HFY fleet. His face appeared on screens across hundreds of enemy ships. He spoke clearly and without emotion. He said this was the final chance for the Ashrak to surrender those responsible for murdering the Discovery crew. If they refused, humanity would take them by force. Supreme Hierarch Drath appeared on the screen surrounded by his military command staff. His multifaceted eyes glittered with religious certainty and contempt. He declared that human arrogance would lead to their extinction. He told Pierce to attack if he dared. The Ashrak would crush the human fleet and then cleanse Earth itself of the heretic infestation. Pierce replied with just 2 words. He said so be it. Then he nodded to his weapons officer and gave a simple command. He told her to release the wolves. From the Third Fleet's carrier ships, 3,000 autonomous combat drones launched into space. Each drone was roughly the size of a small fighter craft. They were equipped with advanced artificial intelligence and armed with plasma cannons and kinetic missiles. The drones swarmed toward the Ashrak fleet like a massive school of predatory fish moving as one coordinated entity. The Ashrak had never encountered drone warfare on this scale. Their military doctrine and tactics were designed for traditional capital ship combat. Their targeting systems were built to track and engage large warships. The small and fast-moving drones completely overwhelmed their defensive capabilities. Within the first few minutes of combat, 40 Ashrak ships were crippled or destroyed by the drone swarm. Pierce gave the order for all ships to advance. He told his fleet to target the Ashrak command vessels. His plan was to cut the head off the snake and throw the enemy into chaos. The Prometheus moved forward like an unstoppable force of nature. Its massive railguns fired tungsten rods that punched through Ashrak shields and armor like they were made of tissue paper. The point defense laser systems created a web of destructive energy that vaporized any incoming missiles before they could get close. The ship's newest weapon was a directed plasma beam that could carve through enemy hulls with terrifying efficiency. The battle raged for 6 hours of continuous combat. The Ashrak fought bravely and with religious fervor, but they were completely outmatched. Earth ships used tactics and technology that the galaxy had never seen combined in this way. The cyber warfare systems disabled enemy ships by taking control of their computers. The drone swarms attacked in coordinated patterns that were impossible to defend against. The kinetic weapons bypassed energy shields entirely. The networked artificial intelligence allowed the entire human fleet to function as a single unified organism. By the time the battle ended, 217 Ashrak ships had been destroyed or captured. The remaining vessels retreated deeper into Ashrak territory. Human casualties were surprisingly light. 2 ships had suffered damage, but both were repairable. 0 human ships had been destroyed. 47 personnel were injured, but not a single human had been killed in the battle. Admiral Pierce broadcast a message directly to the Ashrak government. He said that what they had just witnessed was only a warning. The Ashrak had 72 hours to turn over those responsible for the Discovery massacre. If they refused, the human fleet would move on to engage the Ashrak Second Fleet. Then the Third Fleet. Humanity would keep coming until they either had justice or the entire Ashrak civilization was in ruins. The choice belonged to the Ashrak alone. News of the Ashrak defeat spread across the galaxy even faster than news of the previous battles. A species that had been classified as Category 7 just months ago had now defeated 2 Tier 3 powers and decisively crushed a Tier 2 civilization. The impossible had happened multiple times. The galaxy was forced to completely reassess everything they thought they knew about humanity. On Axis Prime, the Galactic Council convened for the final vote on humanity's reclassification. The mood in the chamber was somber and thoughtful. Many delegates had expected to debate whether to grant humanity Tier 3 status. Now, some were arguing that humans should be classified even higher than that. High Chancellor Mordain addressed the assembly with words that carried great weight. The ancient crystalline being said that the Council stood at a crossroads in galactic history. Humanity had proven itself far more capable than anyone had assessed. But capability alone did not determine classification. The Council also had to consider temperament and philosophy and intentions. Councillor Tharn rose to speak. His massive frame trembled with emotion. He argued that humans had shown aggression and deception and overwhelming force. They were dangerous and unpredictable. He said the Council should quarantine human space and limit their expansion before they became an existential threat to galactic peace and stability. Counselor Lyra countered his argument eloquently. She pointed out that humans had shown restraint along with their strength. Each time they had used military force, it was in direct response to aggression against them. They had not sought these conflicts. They had defended their people and punished those who murdered their citizens. That was not aggression, but justice. The debate continued for hours with passionate arguments on both sides. Finally, Ambassador Velthris called for the formal vote. He said the question was simple. Should humanity be reclassified, and if so, to what tier? Velthris asked first if anyone voted to maintain humanity's current Category 7 status. Not a single hand or appendage was raised anywhere in the chamber. He asked next who voted for Tier 3 status. A few dozen delegates raised their voting instruments. Then he asked who voted for Tier 2 status. The vast majority of the chamber voted in favor of this classification. Finally, Velthris asked who voted for Tier 1 status. This caused surprised murmurs throughout the chamber. Tier 1 was reserved for species that posed potential existential threats. Only 8 civilizations in the entire galaxy held that classification. High Chancellor Mordain raised one crystalline hand in favor of Tier 1. Counselor Lyra did the same. To everyone's shock, a dozen other delegates also voted for the highest classification, including representatives from some of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. Mordain explained the vote. The Chancellor said that humanity deserved Tier 1 consideration, not because they had demonstrated that level of capability yet, but because of what they represented. They were warriors who chose peace. They were technologists who understood restraint. They were individualists who achieved unity. This combination was extremely rare in galactic history. It was dangerous but also valuable. After another hour of heated debate, the final decision was reached. Humanity would be classified as Tier 2 with a provision for automatic review within 5 standard years. It was an unprecedented compromise that satisfied neither the most cautious nor the most generous delegates. Ambassador Marcus stood to address the council one final time. He said that humanity accepted this classification and accepted the responsibilities that came with it, but he wanted to make something absolutely clear. Humanity had not wanted war. They had not wanted to prove themselves through violence. Humans had come to the stars looking for friends and knowledge and a place in the galactic community. Some civilizations had forced humanity to reveal their strength through aggression and violence. Marcus said that humans were scientists and artists and engineers and dreamers. They were parents who worried about their children and children who dreamed of exploring the stars. Humans were capable of terrible violence, but they were also capable of incredible compassion. They had fought wars, but they had also built hospitals. They had created weapons of mass destruction, but they had also eradicated diseases and fed billions. He said that Earth sought partnership and cooperation, not domination or conquest. Humanity wanted to contribute to galactic civilization in positive ways, but they would never be victims. Any species that tested them would learn the same lesson the Zenth and Vrax and Ashrak had learned. Humanity might be new to the stars, but they were neither weak nor helpless. 3 days later, the Ashrak government surrendered to human demands. Supreme Hierarch Drath and 6 military commanders were turned over to human authorities to face trial for mass murder. The Ashrak also paid substantial financial reparations to the families of the 73 dead crew members. They issued a formal apology that was broadcast across the galaxy. On Earth, President